Our journey with Ethan began for me when he was 6 months old. I was concerned then that he wasn't doing a consonant vowel consonant vocalization. He wasn't saying mama, baba, dada, or gaga. And I mentioned this to our family doctor at his 6-month well child visit, and she told me that because we had introduced signs with Ethan, that he was doing the signing first before the vocalizing. And that didn't make sense to me, but I just sort of went with it. But from that point on, I was always worried about Ethan and his development. So several months had passed, and now Ethan was almost 2 years old and still wasn't communicating a lot. I spent time looking on the internet and researching apraxia and autism, and he seemed to fit more into the apraxia category than autism. However, I still wasn't fully sure as to what it was. And this was something that I spent a great deal of time worrying about. And I talked to my family about it, and everyone just said, give him time. Everyone said to wait. He needs time. He will eventually talk. He's only going to be 2. Everyone just said wait. And I've always told my husband that I kept my job, which was servicing kids birth to 3, and my children separate. And I did that to the point where almost it interfered with my children, because I felt that if I had thought about my job more in parenting, then I would have realized how delayed Ethan was. And the children that I was comparing Ethan to, which everyone says not to compare, but let's face it, when you work with kids every day, you're going to compare. And the children I was comparing Ethan to, they were already in special ed and were receiving services. So that was hard, and I remember my husband saying that if he knew what other 2-year-olds were talking like, it would probably make him cry, because we didn't know. Even though I knew, I wasn't ready to accept that or realize that that was something that we were going to be facing. I truly felt that he would just eventually start talking, and that's what I had hoped would happen. So we had a play date with my friend, who's also an early childhood special ed teacher, and we were roommates in college, so we went to her house for the weekend, and we just played and had a good time. And at the time, I didn't think that Ethan was under the microscope, but I was hesitant to take him places because I didn't want to hear people tell me again, oh, your son isn't talking yet. I couldn't hear it again from another person. So that Tuesday after the visit at my friend's, we were talking about work, and then out of nowhere she said to me, have you ever considered private speech for Ethan? And I was defensive. I was instantly defensive. And I just said, he's only 2, and I started crying, and I couldn't stop crying, and she couldn't believe my reaction because it bothered me so much that somebody else noticed that Ethan had a speech delay or disorder or whatever it was at that point. And then that began the crying phase, which I stayed in for probably longer than most people do or should. But I didn't know what to do. I felt, now that somebody brought it to my attention, I had to do something, because if I didn't, then I would look like an even worse parent for not providing him with services that he could benefit from. And I also then started the guilt, because I felt like parents are calling me and asking and looking to me to help their children talk when I was coming home and I was struggling with the same thing. And communication is such a huge piece of development. I struggled with every night, how am I going to get Ethan to talk tonight? What am I going to do that is going to help him form a word and be able to tell us what he wants out of the refrigerator? And it just became so overwhelming, I didn't know what to do. And that night I called almost my whole family and just said, Emily thinks that Ethan needs speech. And even though that's what I felt, I just didn't know where to start, where to begin that process. And she had told me when we were talking, when I was ready, she knew the name of a great private speech therapist whenever I was ready. So I spent that night, the whole night, crying. I couldn't pull myself together. I felt physically sick to the thought of picking up the phone and calling. I truly felt that I could not do it. I couldn't have a child with a special need. It just made me I was so scared it now became about me versus about Ethan. And luckily this stage only lasted a week, where I just struggled with my own thoughts and feelings, that I really forgot about Ethan. When I should have been putting him first from the beginning, it just became about my feelings. So I told myself that I would give Ethan another month, and if he still wasn't talking, then I would call Terry, who Emily, my friend, had recommended. So I first wanted to double check hearing. I wanted to make sure that he was hearing, and then I wanted to check at his 2-year well child visit. I was going to ask the doctor what he had suggested, and this is a different doctor than we had seen when Ethan was 6 months old. So at that appointment, Ethan screamed the entire time, and the doctor was asking me questions about how he interacts with other kids, and I knew completely that he was thinking that Ethan had autism. And I reassured him that that's not how Ethan normally acted. For some reason, during that visit, he was screaming the whole time. But I asked him what he thought about speech, and his daughter just happens to be a speech-language pathologist, so he highly recommended that we pursue and move forward with a speech referral. So he wrote us the referral, and at that point I just felt so relieved that he said we should go forward, because if he had said wait, I would have. And I needed him to tell me to go ahead, because it seemed like everyone else in my family, my husband included, they were kind of basing it on, it was my call, it was up to me. Everyone was saying, I knew that they supported me in whatever decision that I made, but ultimately I knew it came down to my decision. So then from that appointment, we went to see the ENT, and we did the hearing, which came out fine, and the ENT said, there's nothing standing in the way of him communicating. I think you should call special ed. And I said to him, I am special ed. I wanted something different. I wanted just speech. And he said, there's nothing standing in the way from your child to communicate. And I remember crying the whole way home from that visit, thinking, how could he just say that to me? This is my child. And now I knew that we were going to have to call someone and get Ethan the help that he needed. So that afternoon, Ethan was outside flying a kite with his dad, and I quickly, before I would change my mind, I called Terry, our speech-language pathologist, and made the referral. And as soon as I talked to her, as soon as I heard her voice, I knew that we were going to be okay. I knew that she was going to help us. She was going to be a support person that we needed, and I knew that Ethan was going to be okay. And that process, when I said it was a month, it was actually only a week, and thank goodness that we didn't wait any longer. I think one of the most important things we did, one of the most important things we did that day was pick up the phone. And I ran outside and I told my husband that I finally called, and he said, good, I'm glad that you did. So it was just a few days later we went there, and I think I asked her the first day, does he have apraxia? And she said, well, we don't diagnose on the first day. I just needed to know, and I still wasn't sure if it was apraxia or autism. But then a few months later, I think it was a 60-day period, then we were given the diagnosis of apraxia. And throughout all of the visits, I had been fine dealing with the fact that Ethan did have a significant speech delay. And looking back now, I think, what was I thinking, and why did I wait so long? Because it didn't benefit Ethan to wait. And if I could send a message to parents, it would just be that there is hope for your child. Your child will make progress from the point that they are at, and please don't wait like I did. I don't feel like, I look back on it and I feel guilty for waiting so long to help Ethan, because I didn't have the answers. Even as an early childhood special ed teacher, I didn't know things I had tried, they weren't working, and I needed help from somebody. And Terry eventually diagnosed him with apraxia, and I went through another crying phase, but Terry was there to help me through that. I wasn't on my own. Whereas prior to finding Terry, I was on my own. Granted, my family and my husband were very supportive. I still had all of these feelings that I didn't know what to do with. I didn't know how to help my child. One thing that I want parents to know is that you're not alone. Other parents are going through the same thing, and to find another family to connect with. I think that has been very important for us. And if I could tell parents another thing, it would just be that the crying stage does end. it does get better. And just to find a speech therapist that you connect with and one that is supportive and one will help you through this process. I've never been so discouraged in my life as I was prior to coming into Terry's clinic. And now I feel that we have hope. Ethan has made progress, and I can't wait to see the progress that he is going to make. And I owe all of that to Terry because she has given us the tools that we need to be successful. And I'm so happy that we are to the point where we can now focus all of our energy on him and him getting better versus our own feelings of how are we going to deal with this.